It's July 4, 1969, 11:54 p.m., and the quiet suburban streets of Presidio Heights in San Francisco are shattered by a violent and senseless murder. A young couple, Michael Mageau and Darlene Ferrin, have just been brutally attacked by a lone gunman. The sounds of gunfire and screams pierce the air as the shooter fires multiple shots. The terrified victims are left lying next to their parked car, struggling for their lives. The scene is chaotic, and panic is setting in. The area around Lake Herman Road is bathed in a faint moonlight, casting an eerie glow over the entire scene. The sound of crickets provides a stark contrast to the cries for help that echo through the night air. Michael Mageau's desperate attempts to escape have left him with severe injuries, including a gunshot wound to the jaw. Darlene Ferrin is barely clinging to life, her body riddled with bullets. The air is thick with the smell of blood and smoke. Michael Mageau's terrified eyes dart around the scene as he tries to make sense of the horror unfolding before him. He can feel the warmth of his own blood spreading across his injured jaw, and his vision begins to blur. The gunman has vanished into the night, leaving behind only the echoes of his chilling laughter. Darlene Ferrin's pleas for help grow weaker by the second. Michael's screams of terror are drowned out by the approaching sirens. Witnesses in the surrounding area hear the sound of gunfire and screams, but they don't see the gunman. They're too far away to get a good look at the perpetrator. Some report seeing a small, white car speeding away from the scene, but no one can confirm the details. The sounds of sirens grow louder as police units begin to arrive at the scene. The chaos and panic start to subside as law enforcement takes control. Before we go further, hit subscribe and the bell. We post new cases every single day. We're glad you're here with us to explore this dark and twisted case. From the earliest investigations to the latest theories, we'll be breaking it all down for you. So, let's get into it and see if we can uncover the truth behind the Zodiac Killer's terrifying crimes. Let me take you back to the very beginning of this story, to the late 1960s, when a wave of brutal murder swept through Northern California. The victims were young, innocent, and seemingly random. But behind the Zodiac Killer's sinister letters and cryptic codes, lay a complex web of motives and suspects. As we delve deeper into the case, we'll explore the possible connections between the victims and the killer. We'll examine the evidence, and the theories, and see if we can finally uncover the identity of this elusive serial killer. In the summer of 1969, the Zodiac Killer struck again, this time in Vallejo, just a few days after the Presidio Heights attack. The victims, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, were teenagers on a date, parked in a remote area. The killer's brazen attack left the community reeling, and the police struggling to keep up. As the body count rises, the Zodiac Killer sends a cryptic message to the police, taunting them with his clever codes and ciphers. The game is on, and the hunt for the Zodiac Killer has just begun. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Northern California was plagued by a series of unsolved murders that would come to be attributed to the enigmatic Zodiac Killer. The central figure in this case was Arthur Lee Allen, a 30-year-old man living in Berkeley, California. He was a married father of two and worked as a postal worker. Allen was an unassuming man with a normal suburban life, which only added to the mystery surrounding him. His mundane appearance belied a dark secret that would haunt the investigation for decades. Arthur Lee Allen's daily life seemed idyllic, but as it turned out, it was a carefully constructed facade. He was a hard worker and devoted husband and father, but his calm exterior hid a disturbing inner world. Allen was known to be intelligent and charismatic, and those who met him often found themselves drawn to him. He was a churchgoer and an avid reader, which added to his wholesome image. Despite his outwardly normal life, Allen had a fascination with the occult and a dark preoccupation with violence. Allen's likable and relatable persona was a key factor in the initial lack of suspicion surrounding him. He was a friend and neighbor to many in the community, and few would have suspected him of such heinous crimes. However, those who knew him better began to notice subtle changes in his behavior and attitude. His obsession with the occult and his fascination with true crime stories started to seem more sinister. The question is, how well did those around him really know him? As the Zodiac Killer case unfolded, the investigation revealed a complex web of relationships and alliances. Allen's relationships with those around him were multifaceted and often contradictory. He was a trusted friend and confidant to some, while others saw him as a loner and an outsider. But did he have anyone he really trusted? And what about the months leading up to the incident? What changed in Arthur Lee Allen's life to set him on this path of destruction? The answer lies in the details, and we're about to take a closer look. But first, let's go back in time. It was a beautiful spring evening in Vallejo, California, on July 4, 1969, when a series of crimes would forever change the face of Northern California. The temperature was mild, around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, with a gentle breeze blowing in from the Pacific Ocean. David Faraday, 17 years old, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16 years old, had spent the day at the local park, and were now on their way to a high school party in their red 1966 Chevy. As they drove down a secluded stretch of highway, they had no idea that they were being followed. The killer's vehicle was waiting in the shadows. As we know now, the Zodiac Killer had been stalking his victims for weeks, studying their behavior and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He had chosen a deserted stretch of road, with no traffic in sight, where he could carry out his heinous plan without being detected. According to witnesses, the killer had been seen in the area before, cruising the streets in his vehicle, and had even been spotted near the Faradays' home earlier that day. It's believed that the killer had been following the couple for some time, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. The killer's vehicle, a brown car, was seen by witnesses in the area that night. At around 9:55 p.m., David and Betty Lou were driving down a deserted stretch of road when they were ambushed by the Zodiac Killer. He opened fire on the vehicle with a handgun, striking David in the head and Betty Lou in the back. The killer then used a knife to slash at the couple, inflicting multiple wounds. As the couple lay dying, the killer took the time to send a postcard to the police, taunting them with his cryptic message. The killer then fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of blood and destruction. One of the most shocking details of this crime is the fact that the killer not only shot and stabbed his victims, but also took a Polaroid photograph of Betty Lou as she lay dying. This image, which is now widely known, shows the extent of the killer's cruelty and disregard for human life. The photo is a haunting reminder of the brutality of the Zodiac Killer, and is a testament to the enduring horror of this case. The image has become one of the most iconic images of the Zodiac Killer's crimes. It's a chilling reminder of the true extent of the evil that was unleashed that night. Comment below, what do you think really happened here? Did the killer know his victims, or was he a complete stranger? What drove him to commit such a heinous act? The investigation into this case would reveal a trail of clues, but also raise more questions. Who was this killer, and what motivated him to commit such atrocities? The answers to these questions would take years to uncover, but one thing is clear: the Zodiac Killer was a monster who would stop at nothing to claim his victims. As we explore the full scale of what occurred that night, we'll see that the Zodiac Killer's crimes were not just isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern of violence that would continue for years to come. The killer would go on to claim the lives of at least 5 people, and would taunt the police with a series of cryptic letters and codes. But as we delve deeper into the case, we'll also see that the Zodiac Killer was a master manipulator, using his letters to throw the police off his trail. But as the stakes rise, so do the risks. Was the Zodiac Killer one step ahead of the police, or were they closing in on him? The investigation into the Zodiac Killer's crimes would be one of the largest and most complex in American history, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and thousands of hours of detective work. But as we near the end of this chapter, we're left with one question: will we ever catch the Zodiac Killer? The answer, much like the killer himself, remains shrouded in mystery. As the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror unfolded in Northern California, police were initially caught off guard by the brazen nature of the crimes. The first reported murder attributed to the Zodiac Killer was the murder of David Faraday, a 17-year-old high school student, on December 20, 1968. The police response at the time was slow, and it wasn't until the killer sent a cryptic letter to the Vallejo Times-Herald 6 days later that investigators took notice. This letter, signed with a cryptic symbol, would become the first of many communications from the killer, setting the tone for a cat-and-mouse game that would span several years. As the investigation began, police were left scrambling to respond to a series of seemingly unrelated crimes. One piece of evidence stood out, however, as a potential game-changer: a piece of torn ligature material found at one of the crime scenes. It was this piece of evidence that ultimately led investigators to believe that the Zodiac Killer was the one responsible for the murders of Paul Stine and Darlene Ferrin, among others. The material, a type of fibroligature, was sent to the California Department of Justice for analysis, and the results revealed a match for a specific type of rope used by a few select manufacturers. This breakthrough allowed investigators to narrow their focus to a specific region and potentially track down the killer. As the investigation intensified, the police were left racing against time to identify the Zodiac Killer before he struck again. Several individuals emerged as potential suspects, each with their own set of circumstances and potential motives. Richard Gaikowski, a newspaper editor with a troubled past, was one of the earliest suspects to be identified. However, as investigators dug deeper, his alibi panned out, and he was eventually cleared. Other suspects, such as Arthur Lee Allen and Ross Sullivan, also garnered significant attention. Arthur Lee Allen, in particular, was a prime suspect due to his similar physical characteristics to the composite sketches of the killer. While each of these suspects seemed promising, none of them provided conclusive evidence to link them to the Zodiac Killer. One of the most significant missteps in the investigation was when police allowed the killer to lead them on a wild goose chase with an incorrect lead. The killer, through a series of cryptic letters, had hinted that the 408 cipher, a coded message, was the key to unlocking the identity of the killer. However, as investigators pored over the code, they realized that the killer had provided a decoy, designed to mislead them. This red herring led investigators down a rabbit hole of dead ends and false leads, wasting valuable time and resources. The 408 cipher ultimately went unsolved, and the Zodiac Killer was able to continue his killing spree with impunity. The Zodiac Killer, an enigma that has continued to fascinate and terrify us for decades, but in recent years, a shocking twist has shed some new light on the case. It appears that Arthur Lee Allen, a suspect who was extensively investigated by the police back in the 1970s, was not just a mere suspect but actually the killer. New evidence that surfaced in 2020 revealed that Allen had made a chilling statement to a fellow inmate, admitting to being the Zodiac Killer. This statement was previously unknown to the public, and it's what makes it so astonishing. We've all been following this case for years, but this revelation is a game-changer. Allen's statement to the inmate, while not directly saying his name, described the killing of Paul Stine, which matches the Zodiac Killer's signature MO. The details he provided, including the way he killed the cab driver, are identical to the accounts given by the Zodiac Killer in his letters to the police. This new information has been corroborated by former police officials who were involved in the case, and they're all convinced that Allen is indeed the killer. The Zodiac Killer's cryptic codes and messages may have been more than just clever tricks, but a deliberate attempt to mislead the police. This new twist raises more questions than answers, and it's clear